Get away from the beam.
Shutting down.
No.
Attempting shutdown. It's not. It's not shutting down. It's not.
Rise and shine, Mr. Freeman. Rise and shine.
There's really only a select few game series I replay over and over. Resident Evil, StarCraft, and of course Half-Life. Welcome to a new retrospective on FPS Games, and today I'm going to be taking a deep dive into all things Half-Life. And the first game in particular, I've beaten this game a bazillion times, and I can still sit down and play it to this day. But today, I'm going to take a critical look at Half-Life and be honest with myself, strip away those nostalgia glasses, share my personal experiences with this game, the history and knowledge about the game, and still see what holds up and what doesn't in 2022. So for the third time on this channel, I'm yet again focusing on the year 1998. To me, one of the best years in gaming ever. Now before we take a look at Half-Life, what we gotta talk about is the games that came before it. Wolfenstein being the very first 2.5D near 3D first-person shooter, and then the game that pretty much brought first-person shooters to the masses. Absolutely revolutionary Doom. Essentially at this point a new genre was formed and found its home on PC. So with the popularity of Doom came a wave of, let's call them Doom clones, up until the point that id Software had to follow up and make the next gen leap in graphics. However, what people did find is it didn't necessarily make a next gen leap in gameplay. Quake released in '96 to critical acclaim, along with its revolutionary Quake engine. Shortly after its release, a little known dev team called Valve, made up of former Microsoft employees, led by Gabe Newell aka Lord Gaben, would commence work on the Gold Source engine, which was essentially a heavily modified version of the Quake engine, in order to create their very first game called Half-Life. Not a lot was known of this dev team, but a well-known publisher called Sierra at the time would give them the backing they needed in order for them to complete their game. I actually had a copy of PC Gamer, and it really looked like Valve had some fresh ideas, and they wanted to bring these new ideas to what was considered a very crowded genre at this stage. Now the footage you're actually seeing here is from 1997, and Valve got very far into the game's development before it kind of pretty much ripped up a lot of the work and reworked it. I was 12 at the time when it was actually revealed, probably about 6 to 10 months later, and the game looked drastically different than what it did in the 1997 original reveal. And this is the trailer I had on a PC Gamer demo disc that I literally watched about 50 plus times.
Let's get the hell out of here. What is that? Okay, I better wait here and help anyone else who comes by.
If I were a braver man, I would run for the surface. But I'm afraid if the world finds out what we were doing here, Gordon... Well, please, just don't make me come with you.
Well, it does seem there is something to chaos theory after all, yes? I hear something.
Okay, why not? Didn't want to die alone anyway. Open fire! Okay, I'll secure this area.
Now you have to think back at the time. This type of interactivity really wasn't present in first-person shooters. This level of immersion and this level of atmosphere, not seen in any first-person shooter up until this point. People questioned it and thought it was scripted sequences, or purely an elaborate FMV sequence, built out, made to look like gameplay. But it genuinely had everyone in the gaming world talking about it. Now, believe it or not, when the game actually came out, I didn't actually play the game first. I didn't actually manage to get a copy until the year 99. I was actually saving up for a copy. I was only like turning 14 at that stage. I just didn't have the cash. While I waited to get the money together, I obtained the demo of the game again on PC Gamer. However, this demo was so unique. It was called Half-Life Uplink, and it wasn't your typical demo where it just took a segment of the main game. It was actually a brand new level created by Valve, and essentially it was a 20-minute condensed version of Half-Life. So being my first experience of playing the game, I was just taken back by the level of immersion, the level of atmosphere, the interactivity, and everything played out in front of you. It introduced scripted events. There weren't cutscenes. You were never interrupted by an FMV sequence or anything like you've seen previous FPS games. There was just nothing like this at all when it released. And that just made me want to get my hands on the main game even more so. Now, up until this point, I'm really sharing my personal experiences and how I feel about the game from a nostalgic perspective. But what I do want to get into now is, I've only played this last week again, as I said, for the bazillionth time. So how does it feel to play in 2022? Let's take a deep dive into the main game.
Good morning, and welcome to the Black Mesa Transit System. This automated train is provided for the security.
So thinking back on Half-Life's introduction sequence, what a drastic change it was for first-person shooters at the time. No longer have you spawned in and you're suddenly shooting guys and you're looking for a key and you're going down a corridor. No, this was about immersion. This was about creating a real world and presenting it to you in front of your eyes and letting you actually interact even with the tram. The fact that you can move around. This wasn't a cutscene or anything that was really pre-rendered. From the get-go, you're ultimately involved in this game. And what was also an interesting choice by Valve is to make the character mute. Now, you play as Gordon Freeman, but again, he doesn't speak. We've had mute characters before in first-person shooters, again like Doom and Quake, but the decision to make Gordon Freeman mute in Half-Life seems more deliberate, and again, plays into that whole perspective of being completely involved in this game as it unfolds before you. And again, from the off, you slowly start to get the feeling that something isn't quite right about this so-called apparent day-to-day job that you're about to go and complete. And it delivers this in really subtle and inventful ways. Like, for argument's sake, this part here shows you the very, very first time you see who is now known as the G-Man, this mysterious character in the Half-Life universe, which ultimately, even now after Half-Life Alyx, people are still trying to figure out exactly who he is and what's his objective. The game for me ultimately is all about mystery and what drives that mystery and those subtle little hints to the story and how it all develops. And that's not just through the original game, that's the entire series.
Hey, Mr. Freeman. I had a bunch of messages for you, but we had a system crash about 20 minutes ago, and
Aren't you supposed to be in the test chamber half an hour ago?
So as you hop off the tram, head into work, the game just oozes immersion. You're pissing off employees because you're supposed to be somewhere within a given time and you're late. Or you go into the canteen and you pretty much destroy someone's dinner in the microwave.
My God, what are you doing?
It just made the game so believable. And then as you move towards your locker, you step into your hazardous environment suit for the very, very first time. It essentially serves as your body armor throughout the entirety of the game. So yet again, even within 20 minutes of the game starting, you're always constantly being involved. It's not like you've spawned and you suddenly have this armor. You have to go and get your bodysuit that you need to use for work. It's these subtle design choices that just made it so different from every other FPS.
they're waiting for you, Gordon, in the test chamber.
Ultimately, it is guiding you down a linear path, but practically this entire level could have, in theory, been presented to you in an FMV sequence. And what I'm trying to consistently reiterate here is that you are constantly involved up until the very, very last point of when the disaster pretty much kicks in. And that, again, is all about the design that Valve have went for here. And that's ultimately why this introductory sequence is just so engrossing. So what I want to do now is break down the core structure of the game. And I kind of split it really into 3 segments. And then I'm going to take a look to see what's still fun today and also where the game may be showing its age. So generally speaking, in the earlier stages of the game, it feels something more akin to a horror FPS, which really gives you this grim feeling as essentially the aliens have invaded the Earth and overtaken the whole Black Mesa facility, and all the scientists around you are dying in some horrible and grim ways. And you're essentially trying to get to the surface, avoiding traps, hazards, and obviously all the aliens, head crabs, and zombified scientists trying to kill you along the way. The head crabs in particular are really creepy, and they're really Half-Life's take on the facehuggers from Aliens. Seriously, fuck those head crabs, especially when you're in vents, and they still catch me out in a jump scare moments from time to time, even now, especially when you're wearing a headset.
Hey, don't count on the cavalry finding us down here. Head for the surface.
So as you start making your way to the surface, and you start hearing murmurs that soldiers are here to rescue you, but ultimately, you quickly and soon find out they're ultimately here to erase any evidence of this accident taking place. Humans, aliens, everything. And you soon find yourself facing off against the grunts. And honestly, even now after playing these segments, there's still some of the most memorable FPS sequences I can remember. And that's all down to the AI design of the Marines themselves, because they're just so fun to fight. Of course, with this level of artificial intelligence, none of this would really work if the controls didn't work as well. And Half-Life pretty much reinvented PC controls for first-person shooters. Gone were the days of using the cursor keys on the right-hand side of a keyboard, and Valve pretty much introduced WASD controls, which essentially allowed your left hand to move your character and strafe, and then have your free right hand control mouse movement. And the spacing in particular was ingenious, because it allowed you to use the full utilization of both hands to control your character.
Pilot, rocket engine. Destroy the damned thing before it grows any larger. No! Get it off me! Get it out! Get it out!
What's great and so inventive about Half-Life for its time as well, it didn't really have levels, it had chapters. You could essentially play the game from end to end. It's a linear format, but each chapter is connected seamlessly. Every chapter has a standout memorable moment, and it's built around the objective that's put in front of you. One of my favourites, coming up towards the mid part of the game, is of course Blast Pit, which focuses around a monster stuck in an old rocket test lab, which you can't kill with conventional weapons. So you have to enable the fuel, the oxygen, and the power in order to fire the rocket and destroy the beast. What's great about this level is the monster is ever present throughout the entirety of that chapter, and you're constantly trying to avoid it as you get to those objectives before you can actually kill it, which again continues to build that immersion and atmosphere the game throws at you in spades. Another memorable chapter being On a Rail, where you're riding a tram while fighting your way through hordes of marines and aliens in order to launch a satellite rocket. Surface Tension, which I would argue is one of the greatest FPS levels ever made. It's essentially you facing off against marines and aliens, and they're even fighting each other at this stage, with tank battles, choppers, you name it. Now, as I said, I want to be critical about Half-Life 2, and not everything holds up in 2022, and in particular the platforming segments that are scattered amongst certain chapters, and the last few chapters, which are pretty much set in the alien world, are probably the weakest in the entirety of the game. Although the ultimate conclusion to this game is quite satisfying, and you finally get to meet the elusive G-Man.
Gordon Freeman in the flesh. I have recommended your services to my employers.
And he pretty much reveals to you the entire events of the game were ultimately a test in order to see if you were capable of taking a job, and really allowing Valve to set themselves up for a sequel. I highly doubt they thought Half-Life would be as successful as it was, but they definitely wanted to follow it up. And they did in 2004 with Half-Life 2.
Time to choose.
So I think it would be appropriate that I finish up this retrospective and take a look at the future of the franchise. We finally got a successful sequel in 2004, which yet again revolutionized the FPS genre as we knew it. And in fact, I'm planning to do a retrospective for Half-Life 2, hopefully sometime next year. And then Valve changed tactics somewhat, and it looked like they didn't want to do a direct sequel, but deliver episodic content, pretty much follow up and conclude the story of Half-Life 2 in Episode 1 and Episode 2, and they had promised for Episode 3, but we all know how that one went. Episode 2 concluded in 2007, and the worst thing about Episode 2 is it finishes on an absolute massive cliffhanger, and the fact Valve never revisited it for almost 13 years at this point, until they finally revealed Half-Life Alyx. Now, it being a VR title, some fans were disappointed because obviously people wanted a full-blown sequel, and the belief amongst general consumers were that VR was a bit of a gimmick and it was very hard to get good games. But yet again, Valve produced a revolutionary VR experience. Trust me, it is one of the most amazing gaming experiences I've played in almost a decade. And the best thing about it was its ending, because it sorted so many issues from Episode 2 without spoiling anything for anybody, and it ultimately gave us some real hope for the future. And that's it, folks. If you've enjoyed this retrospective and you're new to the channel, please support me by subscribing. See you in the next video. Thanks for watching.